Hi, my name is Peter Neill. I am a music industry photographer based out of London from Ireland. I work with bands all over the UK and Ireland and Europe and sometimes America as well. And I do a lot of talks around the UK and Ireland as well, both to groups and conferences and one-on-one sessions about music industry photography. I'm also a Sony ambassador for the Sony Alpha series of cameras, although you'll find the advice in this channel is very much platform and manufacturer agnostic, as any kind of educational resource should be. I wanted to set up a YouTube channel for quite some time, and there's always been another thing I had to get done first until the pandemic. And like everyone else, kind of my world is reeling, and I am thinking about the future, and I'm aware that gigs might not come around again so quick, certainly not big ones. So I thought, well, this is my chance to actually get going with this. Not only making the channel, but when I'm not recording this episode, I'm also upskilling in other areas by watching other YouTube channels myself. So it's a bit of swings and roundabouts. But for this first video, I wanted to talk about a band called Elbow and some work I did with them last summer for the announcement of their new album. And Giants of All Sizes is the name of the album. And it was summer 2019 when it came out, if you're watching this much later on. I started using a technique that I had never used before. It's a technique that's not typically used in gig photography. Now, this is a technique for doing panoramas, and I have always loved doing panoramas at gigs. But it occurred to me during the gig that how fun would it be to actually get a shallow depth of field panorama, but would involve taking a lot more images than I would normally take a panorama with. Typically, if I'm on my 24-70 and I'm at 24mm or even 35, you might take a panorama like this, 3 or 4 images to get this kind of width, but you won't have anything like the shallow depth of field. So what I ended up doing for this was actually putting the 85mm 1.4 lens on the Sony a7R III, and I think I had it at 1.8. I did have it at 1.8. Just checked it over here on the right, and I was shooting at 1/200th of a second. I had the camera in portrait orientation because I wanted the stitch panorama to be as tall as it could be, especially considering it might be, whether about print, if it ever got printed, but if it's viewed on a phone, you want it to be as visible as possible. So I ended up taking a 10-image panorama in portrait. Knowing the music really helps, because in the particular song that was playing, I knew that the arms would be up in the air. But I did start on the left-hand side of the image, and I started with Guy Garvey, trying to get several pictures until I found one where he was doing a pose that kind of pushed out to the crowd. And that's exactly what this does. And then once I had that, I then started taking images the whole way across in a few different passes within this one song. So a lot of these images are chronologically, maybe not, some of them are not even necessarily from the same pass. But after experimenting with the 40 images that I took, I nailed it down to 10 that kind of worked together with next to no fixes to the stitching required, which is quite nuts. I'll give you a look at the individual images that I used for stitching in the end. As you can see in the second shot, there is a little bit of an overlap with the hand, which was kind of an opportunist thing, because I thought that may help the stitching, and it did. I always tend to leave a good little bit of overlap when I'm doing these, particularly when you're taking a few different images. It really, a few different takes across the crowd. It just gives you more chance of getting what you want for the stitch. And there were moments that worked better than others. And then when stitched in Lightroom, that gives you that unprocessed image. And just to give you an idea of the stitching process, of how well these stitch, I'm going to select them now. I'm going to do right click. Bear in mind, I did have to spend time picking which ones would stitch, and that's just a process of elimination. But here I'm going to go into Panorama, and you can see you've got the preview rendered there. And that preview is literally defaulting to spherical with no tweaking of the settings, nothing. And the auto crop is turned on, but essentially I believe, because I'm using the longer focal length, that what you actually end up with is an image which has less distortion, and therefore there's less warping that happens. And then I'm not going to merge it now whilst I'm recording because it tends to mess with the audio sometimes if I do something like that. But what I ended up with was this unprocessed image. And then in the processed image, it was a case, I'm just going to zoom in again. It was a case really of bumping up the highlights, adding a bit of blue in the shadows, just duotoning a bit, just to bring it a bit to life and pushing the shadows up a little bit. And let's see if also we go into fit view, or fill, I should say. So we set that to fill the screen now. It's 27,000 pixels wide by 7,500 high. So it's pretty significant resolution, as you can see. And you can certainly print this pretty large at 300 dpi. And you can see just how little stitching errors there are. I mean, if I go across slowly and you watch the front of the crowd, it's pretty stunning. By taking about 40 images and picking which 10 to use, it's worked out way better than I could have hoped. Now I've done this, as I said, it took about 40. I've done this kind of technique a number of times since, including a lot on the Script's most recent or current tour that's currently on pause, obviously. And I've kind of got a lot more used to it, and it generally takes me a lot less images to nail it. A couple of other notes about the technique. I wasn't on any kind of tripod. I was literally just turning it on my hip, keeping level, and keeping the shutter speed and aperture obviously the same, and not shifting the focus point. So my focus point was defined very much by essentially what I wanted to be the main focus of the image, which is the lead singer with the arm out over the crowd. But yeah, I hope you found this interesting. It'd be really cool if you want to put any comments and questions on the video, that'd be great. Or you can reach out to me on Shoot the Sound is my username on social media, on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. I do plan on doing one video per week for now, and then potentially divide it up into different streams depending on the demand. But I'm still figuring that stuff out, and a lot of that's going to depend on your comments and questions. But yeah, please keep safe, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed this. But yeah, look after yourselves, and I hope to see you again next time. Thank you.